You know how there are those things you hear about? Sound kind of important, maybe even a bit dry, but you suspect they could actually change how things work.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, today we're doing a deep dive into one of those, Open Educational Resources, or OER.
Mm-hmm.
Think of this as your shortcut to getting clued in on what could be a really significant shift in education. We've got a bunch of interesting stuff lined up, definitions, how OER can level the playing field, a quick look back at where it all started.
Or nuts and bolts of different platforms.
Right, and how OER fits into this bigger idea of open access.
Our goal today is pretty simple, really. We want to give you a clear picture of what OER are, why they're generating so much buzz, and how they connect to these wider trends in education and information sharing.
Exactly. We want those light bulb moments for you without getting lost in unnecessary complexity.
Right. Just the core ideas.
So let's get right to it. What are OER in plain terms?
Well, they're teaching and learning materials that you can use and share completely for free. No cost, no need to ask for permission.
And that includes, what, just textbooks?
Oh, no, much more. Textbooks, yes, but also activities, videos, syllabi, quizzes.
Yeah.
Basically a whole universe of educational content.
Okay. And what really sets them apart from, your typical copyrighted stuff?
The key difference is that the creators have intentionally given up most, if not all, of their ownership rights. They want people to use and share the materials.
That's interesting. So it's not just about being free, it's about the permissions.
Precisely. That fundamental shift in who controls the material. It unlocks possibilities far beyond just saving money. It changes how we can interact with and build upon educational resources in really dynamic ways.
Okay, so how do we know what we're allowed to do with these OER? That's where these Creative Commons licenses come in, right?
Exactly. Creative Commons licenses are like the instruction manual. They spell out precisely how you can use, reuse, adapt, and share the materials.
And that leads us to this concept called the 5 R's of open. I've heard about this.
Yeah, the 5 R's. They really define the core freedoms that make content truly open.
Okay, break them down for us.
First is retain. That's your right to make and keep your own copies. Download it, save it, organize it, it's yours.
Simple enough, retain.
Then there's reuse. This one's pretty broad. You can use the content in all sorts of situations, in class, a study group, on a website, in a presentation, basically anywhere.
Okay, retain, reuse.
Next up is revise. And this is where things get really powerful, especially for educators. It's your right to adapt, change, or even completely rewrite the content.
So like updating an example or translating it.
Absolutely. Need to translate it. Go for it. Found an outdated statistic, fix it. Want to add local context? You have the freedom to do that.
That's huge. Then remix.
Remix. This is the ability to take that original content, or maybe your revised version, and combine it with other resources to create something totally new.
Huh, like mashing things up.
Exactly. Imagine taking the best chapter from one open textbook and combining it with a great video from another source. You can build your own custom educational resource perfectly suited to your needs.
Okay, retain, reuse, revise, remix. What's the last one?
Finally, the 5th R is redistribute. This is simply the right to share copies. Share the original, share your changes, share your remixes with anyone you like, colleagues, students, the world.
Got it. Redistribute. So those 5 rights together, retain, reuse, revise, remix, redistribute, that's what makes it truly open.
That's the essence of it. It defines the flexibility and freedom inherent in OER.
Okay, so putting on the hat of an educator for a moment, why would someone choose to use OER? It seems like maybe more work initially than just picking a standard textbook.
Well, the fundamental drive, as our sources really emphasize, often comes down to the basic human right to access high-quality education.
Ah, so it's a philosophical thing too.
Very much so. OER isn't just a cost-saving measure, though that's important. It reflects a deep commitment to that principle. And, it also connects with this broader shift in education towards more active participation and co-creation.
What do you mean by co-creation?
Educators are increasingly working with learners and other educators to create and share knowledge rather than just delivering it top-down. OER facilitates that kind of collaboration.
That makes sense. And the practical advantages for educators, they seem pretty significant too.
Oh, absolutely. First, there's flexibility. You can share and reuse content as is, which is a great starting point.
Right. Easy enough.
But the real power lies in tailoring it. You can revise and remix materials to bring in the absolute latest research or, current events making headlines this week.
Or local examples that really click with your specific students.
Precisely. It's about keeping learning materials dynamic and relevant in a way that a traditional textbook sort of frozen in time when it was published, simply can't. Imagine updating your course with a groundbreaking discovery announced yesterday. OER makes that possible.
That's a powerful idea. And then there's the potential for greater accessibility compared to just print books.
Yeah, that's another key point. Now, it's crucial to ensure digital accessibility is actually built in properly. But the inherent flexibility of digital OER offers the potential to reach a much wider range of learners with different needs.
Okay.
Plus, the global implications are huge. Knowledge can be shared freely across borders, and we can't overlook the immediate online availability.
Right, no waiting for the bookstore or shipping.
Exactly. Students have the materials from day one, ready to go. No excuses, no delays.
Okay, now let's switch gears. Let's think about the student experience. What's the big appeal of OER for them?
Well, for students, probably the most immediate and tangible benefit is affordability. It's huge.
Yeah, textbook costs are insane.
Absolutely exploded. One of our sources points out they've risen at 3 times the rate of inflation. That's a massive financial barrier for so many students.
I believe it.
OER offers a direct solution. Learning materials online for free, or maybe at a very low cost just for printing if they want a physical copy.
And those savings, they can be used for other essential things, right? Like tech or just rent and food.
Exactly. It frees up a significant amount of money, which can be life-changing for some students.
But does it affect learning? Is it as good as the expensive stuff?
That's the critical question, isn't it? And the research actually indicates that students using OER perform just as well as, and sometimes even better than, those using traditional materials.
Really? Better?
Yeah, we saw a figure stating that 93% of students using OER achieve comparable or better learning outcomes.
Wow. Why is that?
It's often linked back to that immediate and consistent access. No one's falling behind because they couldn't afford the book week 1 or trying to share or relying on library copies. Yeah. Everyone has the material.
That makes perfect sense. And this brings us to a really crucial point highlighted in the sources, the strong connection between textbook costs and equity.
Yes. This is a major driving force behind the OER movement, particularly in diverse systems like the California community colleges.
Tell us more about that connection.
Well, the data clearly shows the disproportionate impact of textbook costs on students from historically underserved backgrounds. The CSUCI white paper had some really compelling, frankly sobering evidence.
Like what?
For instance, Latinx students reported experiencing significantly higher levels of stress due to textbook costs compared to their white peers. It was something like 91% versus 86%.
Wow. Higher stress.
And that pattern of greater burden carries across a whole range of indicators in that study.
You're right. The data in that paper was striking. Latinx students were more likely to not have their required books on day one because of cost.
83.6% versus 75% of white students.
More likely to actually avoid enrolling in a class altogether because they knew the textbook would be expensive.
Yeah, over 30% of Latinx students reported that.
And alarmingly, more likely to have actually failed a course because they couldn't afford the materials.
That figure was really concerning. 12.3% of Latinx students versus 4.4% of white students. It shows a direct link between cost and academic failure for some groups.
And it's not just about ethnicity, right? The data also showed similar impacts for students on financial aid and first-generation students.
Exactly. Students receiving financial aid reported higher stress, were more likely to feel their learning was limited because they couldn't afford books. And for first-generation students, the numbers were even more pronounced. Something like 84% of first-gen students reported not buying textbooks at all due to cost, compared to about 73% of non-first-gen students.
It really paints a clear picture. These costs aren't just an inconvenience, they're real obstacles, especially for students already facing challenges.
Precisely. And it's not just about getting access, it's about achieving success. That's where the University of Georgia study offers a really encouraging perspective.
What did they find?
Their research found that when OER were adopted, and of course grades improved, not just for all students.
Okay, good start.
But the improvements were even greater for non-white students, Pell Grant-eligible students, part-time students, and those from historically underserved populations.
That's a really powerful finding. So OER can actually help close achievement gaps?
It seems so.
Yeah.
And they also saw a reduction in DFW rates, students getting a DEF or withdrawing.
Right.
And again, that decrease was more significant for those same underserved student groups.
Wow.
It really underscores the potential of OER as a tool for promoting equity. As Nicole Allen from Sparks put it, this research directly links OER to equity, with the biggest benefits going to the students most let down by the traditional system.
So this movement towards OER, it isn't some brand new trend that just appeared overnight. It has roots, a history.
Absolutely. While the core ideas connect to earlier open access movements, the MIT OpenCourseWare project, launched back in the early 2000s, is widely seen as the first really big recognized OER initiative.
Making actual MIT course materials free online, that must have been radical
It
then.
was pretty groundbreaking, a huge move.
But the specific term OER came a little later, didn't it?
That's right. David Wiley actually coined open content a bit earlier, maybe 1998. But OER, Open Educational Resources, really gained traction after a UNESCO forum in 2002. That event was key in solidifying the term and the movement.
And there was a declaration, too.
Yes, the Cape Town Open Education Declaration in 2008, that was another key moment, articulating clear principles and goals.
The sources mention 4 main categories within the OER movement. Can you quickly outline those?
Sure. First, you have OpenCourseWare, like that MIT project.
Yep.
Basically free digital versions of actual university course materials, syllabi, notes, assignments, exams.
Okay. Then OER publishers.
Right. Organizations actively creating and publishing open textbooks and other resources. Think Khan Academy or the Saylor Foundation. They produce OER.
Got it. Third.
OER repositories. Think of these as digital libraries or collections where you find, share, and sometimes remix OER in lots of different places. Some are huge aggregators, others are run by single institutions.
And the fourth category is publicly funded initiatives. Sounds like governments are getting involved.
Yes, increasingly. We're seeing policymakers, local, state, national, developing policies, and providing funding to support OER creation and adoption. Sometimes it's direct funding, other times it's requiring open licenses for publicly funded educational projects.
It's interesting that there was some initial skepticism about the quality and credibility of OER. I guess that's natural when something new challenges the status quo.
That's a fair point. There were definitely questions early on, can this free stuff really be as good as the expensive, professionally published textbooks?
Right.
But as the movement has matured and more universities and respected organizations got involved in open publishing, we're seeing a growing mountain of evidence showing the positive impact financially, yes, but also on learning outcomes from K-12 right up through postgrad.
And the sources also mentioned Richard Baraniuk's 2006 TED Talk and the Connections Project, which became OpenStax.
Absolutely, pioneers. Baraniuk's talk really helped articulate the vision, and Connections OpenStax built some of the crucial infrastructure that underpins the OER world today. They're really important early players.
Now, for educators listening and thinking, okay, this OER thing sounds great, but how do I actually work with it? What about the different platforms and formats?
The practicalities. Good question. The tools you'll use often depend on, well, what format the OER is already in, and frankly, your own comfort level with technology.
So familiar tools might work, like Word or Google Docs.
They certainly can be used. Word is familiar. You can make accessible documents if you know how, but it's not really a design program. And you usually end up converting to PDF for sharing, which makes it hard to edit later.
Right. And Google Docs. Easy to use, good for collaboration online.
Big pluses. But formatting can be basic, and sometimes there are accessibility drawbacks, especially with things like complex tables. Again, not really a design tool.
And PDFs. They're everywhere, but you mentioned they're not ideal for OER creation.
PDFs are great for distribution because they look the same everywhere. But editing them, oh boy. It's difficult and often imprecise. It's really best not to create OER as a final PDF. If you find a PDF you want to adapt, try contacting the author for the original source file. That's the gold standard.
Okay. Then we get into platforms more specifically designed for OER, like Pressbooks and LibreTexts.
Yes, these offer more tailored features. Pressbooks lets you create really professional-looking ebooks and other digital formats. Lots of universities use it.
At the cost.
There's a small one-time fee for individual authors, like $19 or $99, depending on features. It offers good customization, lets you embed multimedia, but there is a learning curve.
Any downsides?
Well, it's not totally free, and some advanced tools are only in the expensive EDU license for institutions. Also, importing content smoothly into learning management systems like Canvas isn't always super straightforward.
Okay. And LibreText, that sounded pretty powerful.
LibreTexts is really compelling. Its big strength is this huge existing library of OER that you can easily combine and adapt. You can pull chapters or pages from different sources, edit them, add your own stuff.
And it offers different download formats, like for printing or Canvas?
Yeah, various formats including print, PDF, and importantly, Canvas cartridges for easy import. Plus, it supports interactive features like 3D models, coding exercises, multimedia.
Some impressive learning curve.
A bit steeper than basic tools, probably, but it's free and incredibly flexible for creating comprehensive, dynamic OER.
So it seems there's a growing ecosystem of tools, from simple to quite advanced.
Absolutely. The key is for educators to explore, see what fits their tech skills, their course needs, and their students' needs best. There are options.
Finally, the sources emphasize that OER isn't just happening in a vacuum, it's part of this larger open movement. Can you briefly explain how OER connects with these other open initiatives?
It's really fascinating how OER fits into this broader philosophy of openness and democratizing access to information. One really close cousin is open access.
For academic research, right?
Exactly. It emerged largely as a response to those sky-high subscription costs for academic journals.
Yeah.
The situation where research, often publicly funded,
Ends up locked behind paywalls that even university libraries struggle to afford.
precisely. The traditional model often means the journal holds the copyright, not the researchers or the public. That seriously limits who can read and build upon the research. It slows things down.
So open access aims to fix that.
Right. It advocates for making research articles freely and immediately available online, usually under open licenses, allowing wide use and sharing. It's about modernizing research communication for the digital age. Resources like the Directory of Open Access Journals, DOAJ, help you find this stuff.
Okay, and then there's open data, extending that idea to the raw data itself.
Spot on. The push for open data recognizes the huge value in making the underlying research data, datasets, stats, transcripts, survey results, metadata freely available online.
Why is that important?
The goal is to let anyone download, copy, analyze, reprocess, and use this data for any purpose, without unnecessary barriers. It helps with replicating studies, combining data for new analyses. It boosts transparency and accelerates discovery. Think machine learning, meta-analysis.
So it's all about making information and the building blocks of knowledge as widely accessible and usable as possible. OER, open access, open data.
That's the core principle uniting them, a belief in the power of open access to foster collaboration, innovation, and ultimately a more informed society.
Well, this has truly been an illuminating deep dive into open educational resources. It's clear they represent a lot more than just, free textbooks.
Absolutely. They signify a really important evolution towards a more equitable, adaptable, and current approach to education. More flexible, more up-to-date.
And as we've discussed, the advantages for students like you listening are significant, not just cost, but actual access and engagement.
Definitely. Removing those financial barriers, ensuring everyone has the materials from day one. It makes a real difference.
And it's fascinating to see how OER connects to these broader open initiatives, suggesting this growing momentum towards democratizing access to knowledge in general.
Which brings up a really interesting point for you, the listener, to consider. How might these principles of openness we've explored today extend beyond just educational resources?
Interesting question.
Yeah, in what other areas of your life or maybe your field of interest could adopting this philosophy of free access and collaboration potentially unlock new opportunities or create unexpected benefits? What possibilities emerge?
That's a fantastic thought to ponder. It really broadens the perspective. Hopefully this deep dive has given everyone a solid understanding of this really significant shift in how knowledge is created and shared.
Yeah, hopefully it demystified OER a bit.
There's a whole universe of open resources out there just waiting to be explored. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.